Something extraordinary is happening quietly, yet the world can feel the tremors. A coalition that began as an experiment among 5 ambitious nations has matured into a formidable force, one that is now redrawing the map of global power, finance, and influence. This is not just another expansion, it's a carefully orchestrated rebalancing of the world order, and it's unfolding under one name, BRICS, the awakening of a new economic superpower. Once, BRICS was little more than a clever acronym. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. 5 emerging players seeking a louder voice in global affairs. But that was yesterday's world. By 2025, this alliance has transformed beyond recognition, evolving from a loose coalition into a global powerhouse, now counting 11 full members, 13 formal partners, and more than 30 nations lined up to join. The turning point came early this year. On January 6, 2025, Indonesia officially entered the bloc, bringing not only its vast population, but also a strategic Southeast Asian presence that expanded BRICS's reach deep into the Pacific. Saudi Arabia, once invited in 2023, remains a wild card, still balancing its century-old ties with Washington against the gravitational pull of the rising BRICS world. The start of 2024 marked another major leap. Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates formally took their seats, injecting vital energy corridors, trade routes, and new capital into the alliance. With their inclusion, BRICS now represents over 45% of global GDP and more than half of the world's population, a staggering reality that even a decade ago seemed impossible. And this is only the beginning. The waiting list is long and revealing. Among the 32 nations expressing interest, 23 have already submitted formal applications. From oil-rich Bahrain and Kuwait to industrial Malaysia, from Turkey and Vietnam to Belarus and Mexico, the roster of hopefuls reads like a blueprint for a new global system. For Gulf states, membership means escaping the dollar's shadow while securing stable markets for their oil exports. For Mexico, it's about leverage, the chance to become BRICS's bridge into Latin America. And for Belarus, it's a geopolitical pivot, a gateway to Eastern Europe that pushes BRICS influence deeper into the heart of the continent. Behind the appeal lies something more powerful than symbolism: money. Since 2016, the BRICS New Development Bank has financed nearly $32 billion across 96 major infrastructure projects, many of them in local currencies. This shift, away from the US dollar, has given developing nations a rare lifeline: the power to borrow and build without surrendering economic control to Western institutions. The 2025 Rio Summit marked the dawn of BRICS' next chapter. The world watched as leaders gathered under Brazil's presidency, not to confront the West, but to chart a new vision for the global South. Brazil championed cooperation over confrontation, emphasizing development, stability, and shared prosperity. But beneath the smiles and speeches, deep fault lines remained. For the first time since 2013, Xi Jinping was absent, officially due to scheduling conflicts, while Vladimir Putin, still under an international arrest warrant, addressed the summit by video. Their absence spoke volumes, but the message of the summit was louder still. BRICS was no longer a sideshow to Western power. It was preparing to lead, yet within the alliance, a quiet struggle continues. China and Russia favor rapid expansion, pushing to absorb as many nations as possible into their orbit. India and Brazil, more cautious, argue for discipline, insisting that the bloc must grow with purpose, not haste. The outcome of this internal debate will determine whether BRICS becomes a stable new order, or fractures under its own ambition. And as BRICS rises, tension with Washington is intensifying. What analysts once called a trade rivalry has now evolved into a full-scale economic confrontation. The United States, under President Donald Trump, has turned its trade guns toward the bloc, one member at a time. Citing unfair practices and sanctions evasion, Washington rolled out new tariffs targeting BRICS economies, beginning with China. Beijing's answer was swift and unflinching. Retaliatory tariffs that soared as high as 145%, before eventually stabilizing around 30%. But instead of retreating, China pivoted. It widened its domestic markets to fellow BRICS partners, weaving an alternative trade network designed to bypass the US altogether. Soon after, India became the next target of Washington's trade offensive, a sign that the old rules of global commerce are breaking down fast. What began as a financial alliance has become something far greater, a geopolitical counterweight capable of rewriting the script of world power. BRICS is no longer an acronym. It's a signal, a new language of influence, cooperation, and defiance. And as this alliance grows, one thing is clear: the era of unipolar dominance is fading, and a multipolar world is rising. One where power flows not through Washington or Brussels, but through Sao Paulo, Moscow, Beijing, New Delhi, and beyond. The shift is already underway. The question now is not if the world will change, but how far BRICS is willing to go to shape it. Once praised by Donald Trump as a trusted ally, India now finds itself at the sharp end of Washington's trade arsenal. What began as a 25% tariff on Indian goods quickly doubled to 50%, sending shockwaves through New Delhi's exporters. Brazil didn't escape the hit either. When Washington imposed similar 50% tariffs, President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva urged BRICS nations to stand together, not negotiate separately, and to mount a coordinated economic response. South Africa was next, facing a 30% tariff wall. But this dispute quickly turned political. President Trump accused Pretoria of discriminatory policies against the country's white minority, a claim fiercely denied by South African officials. The fallout deepened when reports surfaced that certain South Africans were granted selective U.S. entry exemptions, further straining already tense diplomatic ties. Russia, already boxed in by earlier sanctions, avoided new trade penalties. But Moscow stepped into a different role, leading BRICS' push for de-dollarization. President Putin framed it as economic self-defense, insulating member economies from U.S. pressure and currency manipulation. At the heart of this movement lies the New Development Bank, NDB, the alliance's financial backbone. Since 2016, it has approved over $32 billion across nearly 100 major infrastructure and energy projects. But what truly sets it apart isn't just the size. It's the currency strategy. Loans are increasingly issued in local currencies, sidestepping the US dollar entirely. This gives members like Egypt, Indonesia, and Ethiopia access to long-term financing without the financial instability that dollar-based lending often brings. For developing nations, that's not convenience, it's economic survival. The most recent milestone came when Indonesia officially joined BRICS, as confirmed by Brazil's government on Monday. With Jakarta's entry, the bloc's membership now stands at 10. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Indonesia, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the UAE. Each new addition expands the bloc's reach, not only across continents, but across energy markets, trade routes, and political spheres. This isn't just growth, it's a strategic realignment of global power. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres put it bluntly. The current system was built by rich countries for rich countries. Most of Africa didn't even have a seat at the table during Bretton Woods. BRICS, in that sense, is not merely an alliance. It's a correction. A platform where the developing world finally gets a seat, a say, and a stake in shaping the global agenda. Energy remains the invisible engine driving much of this transformation. Should Saudi Arabia finalize its membership, it would hand BRICS immense leverage, not only through its oil output, but via its influence in OPEC. With Russia already a major energy power and the UAE and Iran inside the tent, BRICS could soon command a significant portion of global energy flows. For Washington, that's a strategic nightmare. If the bloc starts settling more oil trades in non-dollar currencies, one of the key pillars of U.S. global dominance could begin to crumble. But BRICS's real test isn't size, it's unity. The bigger it gets, the harder it becomes to steer. The bloc's members span every continent, with vastly different economies, ideologies, and priorities. Keeping them aligned won't be easy, especially under the pressure of a trade war. Trump's strategy of targeting members one by one could exploit those differences, tempting some to prioritize U.S. market access over bloc loyalty. Yet paradoxically, that same pressure may also tighten the alliance, accelerating efforts to build a parallel economics ecosystem, one capable of surviving without Western systems. What's clear is that BRICS has moved far beyond theory. With its expanding membership, growing financial clout, and dominance over critical resources, it's emerging as a central force in the next phase of the global economy. A direct challenger to the Western-led order. This deepening partnership, especially between Brazil and China, the B and C of BRICS Plus, signals the formation of a counterweight to the G7 itself. The global implications are immense. For developing nations, BRICS offers an alternative path, fairer financing, broader markets, and political autonomy. For the traditional powers, it's a challenge to the very system that has sustained them for decades. As the alliance continues to expand, its choices on membership, trade policy, and currency reform will reverberate across every corner of the global economy. From energy markets to exchange rates, the ripples of BRICS' rise will touch governments, corporations, and citizens alike. So the question now isn't whether BRICS can reshape the world, it's how far it's willing to go to finish the job. The next chapter of this power shift isn't coming someday. It's already underway.